Today, I'm joined by Pankaj Johar, a filmmaker from Delhi, India, who directed the film Selling Children. We're delighted to announce that it's the WISE Film of the Month of June, in honour of World Day Against Child Labour on the 12th of June. Johar's documentary is an insight into the presence of child slavery in India today, fueled by poverty and inequality. It follows the lives of children from all over India who have been denied a childhood and an education, to be sold to work in mica mines, to pick tea leaves on plantations, or to be domestic helpers. In this interview, we discuss child slavery and labour in India 6 years on from the making of the film, and why raising awareness is key to stopping the vicious cycle of illiteracy, slavery, and poverty. We hope you enjoy our following conversation. To begin, I kind of just want to clarify for people who are watching the interview, what does it mean to be a child labourer?
So different countries have different definitions of child labor, but globally, ILO, which is the most credible body, International Labour Organization, which is a United Nations body, it says that not every kind of child labor is bad. Employing children above minimum age in family businesses or after school for pocket money is in fact a good thing, because it encourages their mental and social well-being and prepares them for life ahead. Whereas employing children with the sole intention of earning profit, exploiting them, depriving them of school, depriving them of their childhood, that's something which would count as child labor. And again, it would also depend upon the country in which they're engaged in, the age of the children, the working conditions, the working environment. For example, in my film Selling Children, we saw them being employed in some very, very harsh conditions where they were working for up to 18 hours a day and barely getting to sleep, leave alone having time to play or go to school. So that is something which is an extreme form of child labor.
And this film was made 6 years ago now, but how many children are still engaged in forced labour in India as of 2024?
So that's always been the case. There has never been an official data about the number of children engaged in work. We call it whether we call it child slavery or child labor. It's definitely acknowledged that child labor exists in a major way in India, but there's no official data. So different organizations come out with their own estimates, and also a country as huge as India, there is so many different kinds of child labor, and also a lot of which is, in fact, majority of it is in informal sectors. So it's very difficult, but by conservative estimates, it's estimated to be around 20 million children still in child labor. There are organizations like Human Rights Watch, US State Department, they come out with their own data. And since, as I said, that a lot of children working are engaged in an informal sector, it's difficult to get an exact figure. And there has never been actually any government data. The last census that was done was in 2011, which is way back, and that put it at 10 million children, which all the experts believed was a very, very conservative figure. When I film, it was thought that around 25 to 30 million children are engaged in some form of labor in India. But that things have improved, of course, and that has come down to around 20 million. But it would differ from person to person. If you would ask someone from a particular organization, they would have a different figure. There's no one organization which has a specific data about this.
Okay, and what are the main causes that are leading to child slavery or child labor in India?
Well, it's the same two reasons major, which would be there for any developing country: poverty and illiteracy. When parents are illiterate, they can be taken for a ride. The traffickers or people who traffic these kids, they can easily sway the parents to make them work, tell them they will have an extra hand. Illiteracy again pushes the parents to produce more kids and engage them in child labor. So it's a vicious circle. I mean, when the parents would be educated, the kids would be educated, and if they would not be poor, if it's also a case of in remoter parts there are not many uh, avenues to earn a livelihood. In far off tribal parts, there is no way that for parents to earn a livelihood, and it's an easy way for them to send their kids away. So of course there is lack of awareness, which a lot of organizations and which films like Selling Children have contributed. They have increased awareness levels, but also the poverty and illiteracy levels, even though they have come down, they still remain very high, and that is those two are major reasons that children are pushed into child slavery or child labor. Um, Education is the key to get rid of all the major problems, and once that happens, I think there would be far lesser numbers of kids engaged in child labor.
And what was your departure point when deciding to make a documentary about child slavery in India?
So this was my second film on child slavery. Before this, I made a very, very personal film. It was called Cecilia, which premiered at ITFA. And it was a very personal film. I started making it when we got to know that our house help, her 14-year-old daughter, had been found dead in a house in Delhi. And our help, Cecilia, she refused to believe it because her daughter was 1,200 miles away in India's northeast, a very remote part, and she was studying in a school there. So for her, this was some kind of a prank. She refused to believe that her daughter could be found dead. And it was only a day later when it became clear that she had been trafficked and found dead in a house in Delhi. Whether she committed suicide or she was pushed to it, no one knows. And that was actually the film, Cecilia's struggle to get justice for her daughter, which she does not get in the end. And during one of the festival screenings, I met Nick Fraser and Mette Hoffman, and I was lucky to meet them because I wanted to make a broader film on child slavery in India, and they were looking to commission a film from India. They were coming with a series called Why Slavery, and they were looking at someone who could make a film on why child slavery can still exist in a country like India. And so it was almost 6 months. It was a hard pitch and a hard sell, but I was finally able to persuade them that I could give them a film that they were looking for, and that was the inception point of Selling Children.
Okay, and maybe a question about the making of the film as well. Did you encounter any challenges when making it? And like say dealing with the emotional weight of having to tell these children's stories?
Uh, the first challenge that I faced when we got into production, something I also spoke about earlier, is getting access to the kids. It was initially very, very difficult to get access to these areas because uh, no one would allow a filmmaker around kids or to be part of raids. And there are multiple raids that you see in the film, and even for the activists who are working in this area, bringing along a filmmaker could sometimes hamper the rescue operations. So they had to be absolutely sure that my presence during the rescue operations would not hamper the rescue that they would be conducting. So the major challenge for me, firstly, was getting access, and which is when I realized that the only way to get access was to tie up with different activists, different organizations, and through them work and film. The second major challenge was again persuading the children to share with me this, because when you have been through such a traumatic time, it you cannot expect them to recount that whole thing again. It's like reliving the past, which no one would want. So what I decided to do was spend extra time with them, which sometimes would be even days, and make a kind of a informal bond with them, so that when they share the story, they would be sharing it with a friend and not with a filmmaker. And of course, hearing those stories was very, very emotionally draining, as I said. So that was again hearing the story, and then moving on to the next area, next part of the film, and again preparing yourself uh, to um, to hear those incidents again was again very challenging, but nowhere near to what it must have been for those kids to recount those period of their life again. Those were the few challenges that we faced. Filming wise, the biggest challenge was, as I said, was when we would be conducting raids with the activists, and that is the time when we kept the crew to a minimal. So there was a time when only I was there because I was also doing the camera for this film. So we would just have no one apart from me during the raids. And sometimes we would use hidden cameras because there was just no way to actually film certain situations. And the only way to do that, to do those rescues, was through. And there is a different, I mean, that's a whole different thing, how ethical or moral that is to use hidden camera. But the
Mhm.
only way to document that was to use a hidden camera.
Mhm.
So those were few challenges of making the film.
And what was your biggest lesson for you in the process of making the documentary?
I mean, this film was a huge learning experience for me myself, because I had been ignorant of many aspects of child trafficking, and when we hear about, so in India, when we talk about child labor, most of the child labor happens with the help of traffickers, because even though they are engaged in, mostly all of the child labor is engaged in informal sector. No formal sector would employ children now with strong laws. And when I made the film, the laws were still there, but the application of those laws was very less. But now, in these 6 years, things have improved a lot. So no formal sector employs children now, and most of the employment happens in informal sector. So the child slavery in these sectors happens with the help of traffickers who traffic the children, and they push them into child slavery or child labor. And for me, when we talk about trafficking, there was the first thing that came to mind was trafficking of girls for sex trade. But there was so much more to it, and viewers who would see the film will see how wide child labor is in India. And it was a huge learning experience for me as well, because of this film. I think I'm more aware, and I'm also a better person. In the 2 years we filmed, for 2 years we spent almost a year in post. So this film took in all 3 years to make, which was a long process, and it was also very emotionally draining, because getting to hear these traumatic stories, and after the end of the day coming back to the hotel room, it was very, very hard and emotionally draining, but a huge learning experience, especially because after the film got made, I also embarked on a huge outreach campaign here in India as well. I had made another film, and I combined these three films into an outreach campaign,
Mhm.
which still goes on. I mean, the campaign outreach of the film still goes on even after 6 years.
Amazing. And I can testify in my own experience that from watching the documentary, you're kind of brought along in your process of understanding what's going on from the departure point of Cecilia into the myriad of ways that child labor is existing. So it's an incredible exploration. an insight into the whole systemic problems behind it. Um, but you say there has been a 25%, if not 50% reduction in the number of children who are engaged in slavery and labor in India. Um, but how has the situation improved? Has it been a legal change, or has there just been much more awareness about the issue?
There has, of course, been a lot more awareness. Of course, Kailash Satyarthi winning the Nobel Peace Prize,
Hmm.
huge spotlight on this issue. There was 2014 or 15, 14 years. So it has been a decade that he won the Nobel Peace Prize, and that brought a huge spotlight on this issue. It made government sit up, and he partnered with the government on a lot of projects. But apart from Kailash, there's so many other activists who are unsung heroes. Not many people know about them, who are working on the ground, and it was through their help that a film like Selling Children was possible, because I on my own would never had the kind of access I got to the children and to activists, and there was some live raids that I was part of, and it could not have happened. So it has been because of, I mean, increase in awareness levels. People who consumers like me who employ used to employ uh, kids at home, even though people, I mean, one can easily see in shopping malls. Small girls acting as nannies for middle class families. It's still common to see, but not as common as it was before. So awareness levels have increased. There are more number of activists who are working in the area. There are more stronger laws that with stronger punishment and stronger time behind the bars, which act as a deterrent.
Hmm.
And all these factors combined have helped in lowering the number of kids engaged in child slavery. Even though, as I said, I mean, you go on a roadside eatery, and it would, if you're on a highway going from Delhi to, let's say, Agra to see the Taj, and you take a break on the highway, sit at a roadside eatery, it would still be common to have a child wait on your table. But as I said, not as common. So still a long way to go. And the figures that I said are still they're only estimates, because there is no official data about the number of children who are still working. And it's also so ingrained because you see children working around you in all the sectors, informal sectors. That is so common that it becomes part of your psyche. You don't find it odd when you find children begging on the street, or waiting your table, or sewing your torn shoe. So it's still common, but yeah, things have improved, but still a long way to go.
Yeah, I hope the numbers keep going down, and I'm sure your efforts are contributing to that a lot as well. Are you still in contact with the children who were interviewed and the organizations who were involved in rescuing the children, I suppose, and helping you with the documentary?
So majority of my contact through these children was through the organizations, and
Hmm.
I was kind of barred from interacting with them afterwards, and I also did not see any point, because once an activist or an organization steps in to rescue the children and becomes part of the rehabilitation process, then the law forbids anyone else from interacting with the children. So that's one thing. Plus, I mean, there was never an inclination from my side, because the activists were doing their own part. The only family that I stayed in touch with for a very long time was Cecilia's family. But even with them, I lost contact because they changed their phone numbers, and I do not really know what's happening with them now. But when we do impact screenings and outreach screenings, then we do bring in case studies to interact with the audiences, and it has happened that some of the case stories that we bring to interact and to share with the audience are people from the film who were there. which also acts in a better way because once an audience has seen someone on the screen in a film and they get to interact with that person, then it it is more powerful when they hear them in person sharing their story, because they of course have a lot of questions, the audience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And along those lines, like what kind of impact do you think that the documentary has made?
In India, as I said, I made first I made Cecilia, then I made Selling Children, and then the Indian government commissioned me to do a biopic on Kailash, because he is the most prominent face, the most prominent activist who is engaged in this work. And that film was shown on national television. And I combined these three films. For impact screenings, it's difficult to show feature length versions. So we have made smaller capsules, which we show depending on the kind of audience we have. And our screenings have ranged from law enforcement agencies to schools to trafficking hotbeds to law students. And I definitely, so in all, in these 6 years, we have close to 120 screenings. And the screenings keep going on. Just last week, we had a screening in a tea estate in northeast state of Assam. It's very popular for its tea, Assam tea. And it's also a very, it used to be a big hotbed of trafficking. The cases have reduced, but there's still uh, children who are trafficked from these areas. So we had a screening there. It was a wonderful screening. So I definitely, it's hard to put on paper with a country of 1.3, 1.4 billion.
Mhm.
Uh, what kind of change has it brought about? Because to expect for a documentary to make to bring about a change in itself would be expecting too much. But I definitely know that on some scale it has increased more awareness. We have screened the film among corporates, among resident welfare associations, housing societies, and we know that the awareness level is definitely much higher than before.
Mhm.
So it is definitely even though maybe in a small way, but it has definitely helped in increasing the awareness.
Great. And I mean, I think if you are preventing even just one child from a life of child labor or child slavery, I think that's the definition of success.
Yeah, I think,
Um,
I mean, not just one. I'm sure with this film and with impact screening, we definitely would have helped hundreds of kids who would now be in a more safer space. I'm
mhm.
very sure about that.
It's wonderful. And apart from raising awareness, what more do you think that we can do to stop the cycle of child labor, and then also how it feeds into poverty and illiteracy?
The biggest thing that we all can do is make sure that we are not consumers of child labor, because
Mhm.
sometimes even in unintentionally a lot of us become consumers of child labor. uh, there was a time in late 90s and 2000 when majority of the carpets, I mean, India is a huge carpet exporting country, and 90% of the carpets were woven by kids. And that is when Kailash had come out with this something called Rugmark, where every carpet industry who did not employ child labor had something called Rugmark on the carpets. So the consumer knew that there's no child labor involved. Uh, every time when there is a soccer World Cup, there are huge number of raids on industries manufacturing footballs, because Nike, I mean, companies like Nike, they outsource manufacturing of footballs. So no one would know what kind of labor is being employed there, even though the systems looking into that have become much more robust. But I mean, so these were just two examples. There is a huge amount of child labor, not just in India, but also in Bangladesh and also in Cambodia, in Vietnam, in garment industry. So we can just make sure that we are consuming products where no child labor has been involved, and that would be the best way to do our own bit to make sure that that we are not consumers of child labor, child trafficking. And in India, the way to reduce it, as I said, it's the biggest contributors are illiteracy and education. So once the education levels increase, the literacy levels increase, there would be an automatic reduction in the number of child labor.
I just have one more question for you. What do you think the power of documentaries is?
I'm from finance background. I left what I was doing. I didn't study films, and I left what I was doing because of my love for fiction cinema. Not Bollywood, because I'm not really a huge fan of Bollywood cinema, but there is a huge, strong, meaningful narrative cinema happening in India. So I left what I was doing for that, but I accidentally fell in love with documentaries. Again, because of the power that they have nothing has the power to, especially in a country like India, where there's so many social and human rights issues. Nothing has more power than a documentary to highlight them. And these are urgent issues, and they need urgent attention. And not just child labor, there's so many other things where India is one of the biggest players in the whole world moving to the right. And India is moving to the right, where there's climate change, and there's a lot happening in India. Just last week, at one point of time, they were at one particular location, the temperature was 50 degrees Celsius. In another part of India, it was flooding. There was cyclone, and in another part of India, the glaciers were melting. So one country and three different issues. So climate change is again one big thing, which is of course affecting the whole world, but also India, just like everywhere else. And there's nothing like a documentary to bring urgent attention to it. The documentaries speak truth to the power. And if the documentary manages to go to A-list festival, win an award, then it brings an even stronger attention and focus on the issue. So I think documentaries, and even though the people who fund nonfiction cinema has lessened over the years, the documentary industry is going through a very difficult period. But there has never been a more important time for documentaries and to tell important stories.
Yeah, I totally agree. Um, that's great. Thank you so much for your time. Is there anything else you would like to add?
It was nice reliving those 3 years of my life. As I said, this film has made me. It has changed me for better, and also made me realize my own role as a storyteller.
It's been wonderful talking to you. It's been very interesting hearing about all the different elements that goes into the story, and um, how its impact, I suppose, 6 years on. It's incredibly impressive, the whole project, and I really hope that it continues to be seen and heard all around the world.